Hello everyone, this is going to be a short tutorial on some of the options you have for making the zombie hordes more challenging. I'm going to be focusing on the Blood Moon hordes because I find that since these are an integral part of the game, they should be as fun as possible. I'm going to be looking at some of the in-game settings, but I'm also going to go through some of the configuration files for modifying their behavior. If you find the video useful, leave a like, subscribe, and share your own comments below on how you make the game more challenging yourself. A question you might have is, why would you actually bother to edit the game files, edit the configuration files? And as a new player, you probably would not. The game is quite challenging. As you explore, you'll learn how the game is. If you're playing multiplayer, or if you're an experienced player, you probably quickly run into where you have multiple Blood Moon hordes and they're not really scaling to your experience level. You have your walls, you maybe even have concrete, you place down your barbed wire and your spikes, and then you get a small horde. And then you have to wait another week to see if you get a better horde coming in. And that's not really fun. So I started looking into what options there are for modifying this behavior. And this is something that seems to have changed in between, especially Alpha 14 and Alpha 15, where previously the horde composition was fixed. So you would get one specific horde on day 7, you would get another one on day 14, and so on. As the game shifted over to Alpha 15, it's applying some calculation based on your level, based on the difficulty, and then trying to match a horde that should be theoretically challenging you. Of course, since this is a new way of doing it, it's probably not entirely tweaked to handle experienced players. The good news of the new system, however, is that it's flexible. You can change a number of the variables that will affect the configuration. So we're going to be starting with some of the in-game settings, and if you've been playing the game before, you naturally know what they are. I mean, you have the standard difficulty settings. These generally apply as far as zombie health and how much damage they do. They also do impact the hordes, as you'll see later on, and that's why I bring them up here. The more difficult you have as far as the game setting, the higher Blood Moon hordes you will also get later on. Beyond that, of course, you have the normal, where they run or not, where they're feral or normal. So with that, we're going to look into the configuration files. So we're now going to turn to the configuration files themselves. The easiest way to access is just go to your Steam client, hit the game, properties, local files, browse local files, and it'll open up in a new window. If something goes wrong as you're modifying the files, just hit verify integrity of game cache, and it will replace whatever changed files you have with a fresh copy from the server itself. So we're going to go into the data and config folder. There's a lot of different configuration files in here, and you can of course go through all of them. The ones we're going to focus on is the game stages and the entity groups. So looking at the entity groups, this is where the game keeps all the different groups that you're going to be encountering. You have the standard zombie group, you have the night zombies, wasteland, etc. You also have the different groups that correspond to specific horde game stage. Like you look at the game stage 14, there's different types of zombies that will be spawning. If you go down to a higher game stage, you'll see you'll get cops, you'll get ferals, and you'll probably get some dogs, etc. The higher the number is, the more difficult the actual horde is going to be, and it also has more of these special zombies such as the soldiers and hazmat, etc. So we're going to come back to this file in a little bit to look at some of the possible performance tweaks we can make. So for now, we're going to close it down. We're going to go to the gamestages.xml file. So this file is the main file that we'll be tweaking. It's quite well commented by the developers, so it has a lot of information of how these blood moons work, how they're being generated, etc. For individual players, this is the calculation that applies. This is where the game stage is being calculated based on certain variables that the game has. For groups, it has a slightly different one where it takes into account each individual player, but also has some diminishing returns for each of these players in the group. Further down you have the variables that we're going to be changing. Starting weight is basically a plain multiplier. If you double it to 2, it'll double the game stage as well. The next few ones relate to the game difficulty. If you're on Scavenger, it's 0. If you're on Insane, it's 0.5. Normally you don't change these one in the config, you do that in the game. You also have a Days Alive difficulty bonus, which is being applied on both groups as well as for single players. So it's a pretty good one to change. If you bump it up to 0.2, you're going to see quite a large change in the game stage being calculated. The next one is a Days Alive change when killed, where the game will deduct this number from your games alive for that specific player. This means that for individual players, if you die a number of times, the game will assume that you are a lot weaker than you might be, so it can be problematic. I like to bring this one down to 0 to not mess up the calculation. You also have this diminishing returns, where in groups, for each subsequent player being calculated, it will have a slight diminishing return. I generally set this one down to 0 as well. It's somewhat debatable whether it should be decreasing it or whether it should be increasing it as you have groups that are larger, because larger groups might be looking after each other a lot more than they would for individual players, where no one can actually help you if something goes wrong. So these items all impact the actual game stage number that is being calculated. When a game stage has been calculated, it will then cross-reference into this part, where a higher game stage will generate a higher level horde as well. As you see it here, it's the horde stage GS and a number, and this will correspond to the entitygroups.xml file that we looked at previously. A bit of a problem here is that for the lower stages, it will scale from 1 to 7, or actually 1 to 8. However, as you can see, once you start hitting game stage 17, it will still have a maximum concurrent amount of zombies of 8. And this is probably for performance reasons, because the more zombies you have being spawned, the greater the demand on your system is going to be. For a solo player, it might not be a major deal, but if you have a group of 3, 4, 5 players and you're only having 8 zombies at a time, this is obviously not quite as interesting as it could be. So we will be changing this one up as well. So we're going to do a copy here, and we're going to go into replace. I'm going to do a max alive, and I'm going to change that one up to 20. Now you also have to make sure that you're changing the A to capital A, otherwise I believe it will not work. So you just do replace all, and you hit save. This means that when the horde is being spawned, it will keep, in this case, 20 of them alive at the same time. You can change this to whatever you want to, but you probably want to take a bit of a note and test it out first, because the higher it gets, the more demanding is going to be placed on your computer itself, and that will impact your FPS. So 16, 20, maybe 30 might still be reasonable, but if you bump it up to 50 or 100, it might have some significant issues. So let's say you want to have a lot of concurrent zombies, but you're running into an FPS drop that is not acceptable. You can still make some changes there as well. If you go back to the entitygroups.xml file, you'll see that at the top there are some of the basic zombies, and these are easy for the game to generate. If you go down into the lower game stages, you'll notice there's a lot of these special zombies. You have the soldier, utility worker, you have female hazmat, miner, etc. And these are all special zombies that look great, they have nice loot, but they're a lot more difficult for the game to generate efficiently as well. So what you can do, and of course this is a lot of extra effort, is to go through this file and start substituting these special zombies for some of these generic ones, and that should improve the performance that you'll be seeing. Now the best way to test this out is probably just to make a backup of your saves right before the Blood Moon Horde, make whatever configuration tweaks you want to have, run through the Horde, and then see how the result is. As you can just replace the backup and replay it, you should be able to get to a challenging level that is appropriate for yourself and your group. If you're interested to see an example of some of these configuration changes and how it impacts the hordes, I made a test video that I'm linking in the description as well. I go through 4 different scenarios and I showcase the different resulting hordes that are being generated. That might give you some ideas of how this actually applies. And with that, I'm going to conclude this tutorial, and good luck.